This whole thing with Colby is very, very personal. It came out of a crisis in my son's life. That's a real historical figure. His first name is Bruno, and he survived the war. And he wrote
Whoa.
everything down, actually notarized it because he knew that this was a saint.
David and I had an awesome opportunity to try something a little different for this video. And we were given the chance to interview Dr. Marcellino D'Ambrosio. He is the executive producer for the film Triumph of the Heart, which is a movie about St. Maximilian Kolbe and his life. Let me tell you something. David and I have never done anything like this, but honestly, it went really well. And I hope you enjoy this interview. Dr. D'Ambrosio was so gracious and he was able to share with us some of the behind the scenes and crazy stories of how this film came to be and also the reasoning behind it, which is extremely deep and personal. So I want to just take a moment to humbly ask you to click the like button if you enjoy this video, if you enjoy this type of content, and comment below your favorite saint and maybe share a little bit about that saint story. Because as we'll see, St. Maximilian Kolbe and his story, it changes lives and it still is changing lives to this day. So hope you guys enjoy and we'll see you on the other side. Thank you for joining us. We're here with Dr. Marcellino D'Ambrosio. He also goes by Dr. Italy and he is the executive producer for the new film coming out on St. Maximilian Kolbe called Triumph of the Heart. So Dr. D'Ambrosio, Dr. Italy, thank you for joining us today.
Christian, a pleasure. It's always a pleasure to be with brothers in the Lord, but especially those who can pronounce my name. That is such a treat. There are very few who do. So, congratulations. Proves your Italian blood there,
Let's
Christian.
go. Let's go. We did
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
The fellow Italians here joining. We're all
Yeah.
together. I've done a little research on you, and I know there's so many different things we can ask you about and so many different things you can talk about. You're a best-selling author, all this, but we're here today to talk about this amazing film that David and I had the opportunity to watch last night, the pre-screening of it on St. Maximilian Kolbe. And we just want to hear a little bit first about why St. Maximilian Kolbe. What's the vision for the creation of this film in general?
All right. Maximilian Kolbe. Why Maximilian Kolbe? Well, it wasn't really like we were just sitting around saying who would be a great saint to do a movie on. It didn't really happen that way, although there's been a great and tremendous desire on the part of my son Anthony to see Catholic movies, saints movies that are not corny, which there's a lot of religious film that's a little corny. You have to just admit it, or that doesn't just soft pedal a person's sanctity in order to try to gain some wider audience, which has happened. So, like, how do we do a saints movie that really is true to the person of the saint and what a saint is and what holiness is and how a saint impacts people. And then on the other hand, how do we do it in an artistically beautiful way so that's truly art? Because as Catholics, we were in the vanguard of Western art, from the time of the late Roman Empire all the way to maybe 100 years ago. So we were the artistic leaders, and that's not happening right now in new forms of media necessarily, especially when it comes to film. So, how do we maybe make a change? How do we blaze a trail? And this whole thing with Colby is very, very personal. It came out of a crisis in my son's life. A guy who went to seminary. He was named after St. Anthony and St. Francis of Assisi. Very Franciscan in his spirituality in many ways. Um, was a youth minister very successfully, and hit a roadblock, more than a roadblock, a wall at full speed, a health crisis that was inexplicable. No one was able to diagnose it. Seemed like Anthony was actually going crazy because he had panic attacks and sleeplessness. And when you have sleeplessness, you do go crazy if it's bad enough. And his was bad enough. And he lost his faith in the middle of this. And it was in despair and in hopelessness and isolation. And in the middle of all this, it was hard to watch our family watching this, trying to accompany him and love him through it. But it was Colby who kind of broke in. He discovered the story of Colby, and he felt like Colby was coming into an isolation cell that he was in. And then it made him realize, the story of Colby is never told after the lineup. People don't talk about what happened in that cell. And Anthony was convinced that Colby died not just for the man he saved, but for the nine guys who he accompanied in that 14-day journey. And I think that was a spirit-led insight. And so this script began to be written in the midst of his sleeplessness before he was even, cured. We went to Auschwitz when he was still. It turns out there's a diet issue, and he didn't know what he could eat, and so he was skin and bones. We went to Auschwitz 3 years ago, and he was a skeleton almost because he was eating salad with olive oil, and that was like, the only thing that didn't trigger these things. It was kind of insane, but we went there, we prayed there. And the movie had a certain kind of a birth at that moment. It had a prehistory, but that was a key moment 3 years ago, in August of this year, being in Poland together. So this came out of Anthony's suffering. He portrays the suffering of the men as well as the holiness of Kolbe. And I don't think he could have done that if he hadn't been through this suffering that he went through. Um, and so, anyway, Anthony, of course, recovered his faith with the help of Maximilian Kolbe. And so we felt like it was his duty to tell this story to the world. And there we go.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting you mentioned that Colby did it not just for the one guy, but for the nine other men. And I was thinking about this a lot last night. We were watching the movie and the themes, and it came personal to me. And the German guards, they're all like, you're doing this for no reason. Like, even if you save that one guy, like, who cares? And I'm sitting there watching the art you made about his life and being like, wow, this is affecting me, right? So it's
Mm.
affecting the one guy, the nine guys, and now everyone else that hears the story. And it's like, oh, get wrecked, Satan. You know what I mean? Like, we came here and what you wanted to destroy, like, is now spiritually multiplied. And I guess that puts me into a question of like, you do some flashbacks in the film about St. Maximilian Kolbe to give a little more context to his character and his life. Um, and so, kind of, what are you trying to highlight? What are the main things you are trying to show us about St. Maximilian Kolbe in his life leading up to being in the cell with the guys and kind of where he's coming from?
Well, I think a very clear message of the movie is that all of the work that Colby did in media is really important. It was important, and he's a pioneer in media evangelization. But at the end of the day, it wasn't so much him printing the word, but living the word, him becoming word made flesh. Not, of course, in the same way that Christ is consubstantial with the Father, but in other words, the word of Christ becomes flesh in him, and people can see Christ by. And Christ is with them because Colby's with them, and I think that's part of the meaning of the movie. There's so many themes. This is one of the reasons why I think it's artistically a very rich film because there's there's so much to get out of it. Like I've seen the movie multiple times in various iterations, and I'm seeing new connections every time. Every time it stays with me for days, and I'm journaling about it and I'm writing about it, and there are lines in there. There's so many things that that hope. How do you talk to people who are in despair? And there's a way that sometimes we do pious platitudes and try to just convince them intellectually that everything is going to work out, everything has a purpose. And Colby kind of shows us a different way, a more effective way of suffering with people, of being with them, seeing them in their suffering, loving them in their suffering, accompanying them in their suffering. Compassion means suffer with. That's what it means. And so Colby shows us what that looks like here.
I mean, you're so right. This is a movie that I could watch again tonight and I could be just as invested in it and get something totally different, probably get more out of it the second time, right? Um, yeah, that theme of redemptive suffering and just the reversal of what the world sees versus what God sees is so apparent and brings so much hope. There's one, first of all, like the singing. I love the singing every time they started doing that. And he's like, I'm forming a militia. Like he's in the prison. I'm forming a militia, and there's a spot for nine men. It's like his character is just so it's just so beautiful, and like so innocent almost, and like the depths of despair, and they're all going to die. First of all, just quick question. What I could have researched this, but what was that song that they were singing? I assume it was some type of prayer because people would do the sign of the cross or like take off their hat when they heard them.
Yeah, actually, it was a Polish patriotism song, and,
Oh,
and so Colby led them. This is in real life now. He led them in hymns, but he also led them in Polish patriotic songs. And that song is all about the invader may trample us, but it will never crush us, kind of a lyric. It's a really powerful song of defiance. And everyone in that cell could sing that song. There were Jews in the cell, there were Catholics in the cell, there were people who were unbelievers, at least when they went into the cell. And everyone could sing that song. And I think Kolbe, this is one of the reasons why he's so amazing. Kolbe in real life did an amazing, beautiful job at winning by through friendship and respect people who were not Catholic. He did this in Japan. He actually profoundly affected a Buddhist monk who later became Catholic, and also a Protestant pastor who later became Catholic. But he didn't, arm wrestle them into the kingdom. He loved them into the kingdom. And in the camps, we actually have lots of firsthand testimony of how he related to people in the three prisons he was in, because some of those people survived from each prison. Auschwitz was the last one he was in, and they include Jews. They include skeptical people who had lost their faith, and they talk about how Kolbe loved them, and he basically really elevated their humanity, even when they weren't ready to hear the fullness of the gospel. So I think that's a beautiful piece of it all.
Oh my
Um,
gosh, yeah. So inspirational. Like in the cell, the way he was able to win over people who were despairing, but he just related to them, right? He kind of met them at their level as opposed to maybe just saying like repent, like, and there's a spot for that. But
yeah, right.
I'm a missionary with Focus. I don't know if you've heard of that, but this is my fifth year being a missionary on college
Awesome.
campuses. And David teaches at a school at a Catholic school, and it's like we have to relate to people first, get on their level, and then we can bring in these spiritual truths. But we need to like show them Christ and tell them with words as well. So man, I just love seeing that. Okay, so you mentioned a little bit about the sources and just like the historical witnesses that you have. Yeah, what went into that, and what kind of research did you do? Did you guys find anything like that was, oh my gosh, this is groundbreaking? Or yeah, what kind of sources did you use to kind of come up with the accuracy of the account?
Okay, first of all, you have Colby's letters. So I'm a historian, and so I know that letters and firsthand testimony of people who knew a person, these are some of the best historical sources you can get. And so that's what was used by Anthony. And I followed, I didn't read the letters. I didn't have time to read letters, but I read a collection of firsthand testimony. There's a book called Kolbe, A Man for Others. And let me see, I have it right here. So it's out of print. Okay, I'm going to show
Wow.
it to you. But it's out of print. It costs a lot of money to find a used copy, which I did with thrift books or eBay or something. But anyway, it's a gal who back in the 90s, she not only accessed the process of the beatification. That's where the beatification is where you have all the character witnesses and all that kind of stuff. But she also went out and interviewed survivors that didn't make it into the canonization beatification process. So she found some people in the United States who were Auschwitz survivors, who talked about Kolbe. And so it's a really rich source of what he was like all throughout his life. So it starts with his youth. So it has people who knew him in his youth in the seminary, but all the way through his imprisonment, Japan, and then the imprisonments. And basically the characters that Anthony, the writer, created in that cell, because we don't know exactly the names of the guys in the cell. So those guys, they're fictional characters, but they represent the people in Auschwitz at that time.
Mm.
So you have several Jews, you have a gypsy, you have a homosexual, these are the people who you have communists. And you have Catholics who, there were no super fervent Catholics, but there was one guy who was a pretty good, pure of heart, sort of a lovable Catholic guy, right? So, but you had that kind of those are the kinds of characters you had, and the despair that they had at the beginning is historical. That janitor figure, there's a guy who comes in and takes out the bodies every day and
Yeah.
scrubs the floor with his blood, or that kind of thing. That's a real historical figure. His first name is Bruno, and he survived the war, and he wrote
Whoa.
everything down that he could remember right after the war. And he actually notarized it because he knew that this was a saint, and he knew this was really important to capture this testimony. And then you have people who survived from outside the prison, those people that you saw listening, taking their hat off, making the sign of the cross,
Yep.
some of those people survived the camp, and they told about the impact of the singing on them and their morale and how it inspired and moved them. So, of course, there's so much there that comes from these sources. So much.
So beautiful. Yeah, it's awesome. We were definitely wondering about the history, but it sounds like it was pretty accurate. Like a lot, like I'm sure you guys took some creative liberties, but that sounds
Yeah.
very, very accurate. That kind of gets me thinking about like the production side of it a little bit more. Like you're talking a lot about the cell, and like we've both been to Auschwitz, and we were both like, did you actually go there? Because it looks exactly.
Yeah, yeah. The actual cell, first of all, you can't film in Auschwitz because it's
Oh, that makes
a
sense.
burial memorial. So I think what we had to do is we had to find brick buildings from the same era that looked almost exactly like the buildings in Auschwitz. So if you've been to Auschwitz, I can understand why you would say, "Wow, that looked just like Auschwitz." It does. The cell in Auschwitz is actually smaller. Those guys were stuck in a smaller cell, but that cell that we got was an amazing set. Honestly, I mean, it was amazing to find that. It was amazing to find the buildings. Everything was a God thing because it doesn't look at all like a low budget film, but we had meager funds and so much was donated. So much was done crowdfunding kind of way. I mean, the actors were flown and the crew from the United States, from England were flown on frequent flyer miles donated by fans.
It's awesome.
Yeah, and the guys every day prayed together, even though a lot of them weren't Catholic. Everyone prayed and did a meditation led by the director before they started every day. The guys lost 30 pounds who were in the
Oh
cell.
my
They
gosh.
all looked apart, had to have their heads shaved, which really was a sacrifice too, because they couldn't do other roles immediately. You know what I mean? It takes time for hair to grow back and for body weight to
Mhm.
come back. So they all worked at incredibly low wages. And a couple of those actors, most Americans wouldn't recognize anybody there. Two of them are very recognizable to Polish audiences, and
Mhm.
have a fairly high profile in Poland. But they worked for beans and they ate beans, because they loved those two actors, particularly loved Maximilian Kolbe. So that's kind of cool backstory to the way the whole thing happened.
Yeah, that's amazing. Just a follow-up to that. Were there any, and you might not know, obviously we don't know all the fruits that have come about this with the cast and crew, but yeah, did you notice any conversions within the cast and crew, or did anyone really take to his story that did not know much about his story before?
Oh, everyone took to his story who didn't know about his story before. And the people who knew his story were much more deeply moved. It's really interesting. When you say conversions, conversion is a gradual process and interior. Sometimes it can be manifest in an outward thing like, leaving one church and joining another.
Hmm.
But there's a whole lot more that's going on. And so a lot of people, everyone who worked on the film said that their life will never be the same. Now,
Amen.
I don't know that anybody actually came into full communion in the Catholic Church that wasn't. I really don't know how, and I'm interested in talking to more of the cast. So I've only met two of the cast members because they filmed in the United States. I didn't go to Poland, so I saw one scene that was filmed in the States. It was the commandant and his wife in their home. And we did some of
Oh,
those scenes in Dallas. So I was there and watched that and got to know the two of them. Um, I'd love to have more time. We have a premiere coming up in the United States on Monday, Mary's birthday, September 8th. And there'll be a lot of the Polish cast that will come over and so I'll have a chance to ask them, how did this impact you? I hope I can get around to doing that.
oh my gosh, yeah, that's so exciting. And obviously we will not know all of the fruit that comes about. God
Right.
is just continuing to work in people's lives. But it kind of reminds me of like the Passion of the Christ, like some stories that came from that of just during the filming of it, people converted because like this story has power.
Yeah.
Um, and it's just such a beautiful and just a beautiful rendition. Like, yeah, probably some actual suffering of the cast, right? They're actually
Mm.
like going through difficult things and actually uniting it to Christ. So it's amazing. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're also. this is kind of off script, but we're brothers. We're kind of building, I guess you could say, some sort of media Catholic company. We just make videos. Yeah, we
Catholic
basically just make
videos.
videos. But we're wondering kind of what's the dynamic of, I guess, you working with your son? Is it in a sort of family deal? Is that at all difficult, or are there, can you speak to that at all?
I would just say that all my kids are amazing, and we work on rehabbing houses together, and we've done a lot of different things.
Sweet.
But working to serve the Lord together is really one of the highlights of my life, I have to say. Working with Anthony on this, but the whole family's involved in this in some way. My and so working together for the Lord and to do this is just really excellent. I'll also say that Anthony's sister is at Ascension Press, and she is kind of like the right hand gal to Father Mike Schmitz, Jeff Cavins, Ted Sri. She's over the whole production of the podcasts and
Wow.
the videos. So I just recently worked with her on a project, a new book on Leo the 14th. And that was a great joy too. Like, it's like amazing thing to work together for the Lord. And our family does pray together. So when we get together, I don't want to spoil this for anybody who hasn't seen the movie, but there's a Marian hymn that actually comes from our family life. The tonality of that particular hymn is Gregorian chant that I learned on retreat at a Trappist monastery when I was a kid, and I taught to my kids, and now my grandkids know it. So we actually sing that Marian hymn together, all three generations, whenever our family's together, which is really cool.
Wow, sweet. Praise God. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. This is maybe our last question. I know we're running short on time, but how has the making of this film and, as you dove into the story of Colby, how has it impacted you personally?
It has really made me realize, number one, that I have nothing to complain about and feel sorry for myself about. When you look at what what they suffered. I mean, honestly, like one of the takeaways is a profound respect of the suffering of the people who went through this meat grinder that's called Auschwitz or any concentration camp. So, I mean, that's one thing. Gosh, I my life is so easy. Well, but another is like I thought I was generous, but I don't know how to give, and I need to let Colby and Jesus teach me how to be more generous in giving. Um, and the more generous we are in giving, the bigger things God can do. And He has bigger ideas than we have. So I think it's caused me to expand my vision. I think this movie is an example of expanded vision. But at every single crossroads we've come to, leading up to this theatrical release, there's been, like a lot of miracles that have had to happen. And every single time we're like the people of Israel, we forget the last time that God worked a miracle and we're doubting that He's going to work another one. So it's a call to faith, and it's a call to hope, and it's a call to love for me.
Yeah, I mean, I could say I was so inspired yesterday, and I'm just like, after the movie, I'm like, I want to be a saint now. Like, I want to be a saint, and like that's going to be really hard. And something just that has stuck with me is something the German officer said to Colby, kind of like through the little window. He said, "All your love has accomplished is your death and the death of your friends." And in the eyes of the world, like it's same with Christ. In the eyes of the world, he just was a failed revolutionary that died, and that's it, right? And that's all he accomplished. But in the eyes of God, and obviously in true reality, this is everything. Love is everything. And Colby he's with God forever in heaven, and he has brought people with him, and there's eternal significance to that love. And I think that's just something that has struck me in watching the movie. And honestly, whoever's watching this, for our viewers, watch it. Like, you need to experience it yourself. And yeah, Dr. Idil, if there's anything you want to share to our viewers, or how they can kind of get involved, or where they can watch the
Yeah,
movie.
I would tell people to go to the website. A quick way to go that's easy to remember is colbymovie.com. Colbymovie.com. Right now, lots of the screenings are sold out around the country, but it's possible that some more tickets will be made available in the next couple of weeks for those screenings. So you might want to go and check out what's going on in your area. You can actually search and kind of see where there are screenings that have been bought out in your particular area. But the other thing is it should be in theaters. And like just generally speaking, there are going to be some theaters and some markets are going to carry the movie. So look for it the weekend of September 12th and afterwards. We already have some theaters getting booked out for the following weekend, which is great. Of course, it will be streaming down the road. I can't, things are in negotiation stage, so I can't tell you guys where for sure you can see it. But I want to just say this. I really feel very strongly this was a movie that was made by a former youth minister that was made to speak to young people and the struggles and doubts that young people have. I really think it's important for our college students to see it, for young adults to see it, even for older high school students to see it. So focus missionaries, net missionaries, you need to see it so you can share it with the kids you're working with. I think it'll really make a huge impression on them.
Yeah, great. I completely agree. Dr. Italy, thank you so much for being with us. It is an honor, and we look forward to just seeing where this movie goes. And we're going to hype it up. Okay. We're number one
Thank
fans
you.
here. Let's go. That's great.
For God's glory, for God and the Immaculata.
That's right. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Thanks so much, guys.
All right.
Yeah,
Thanks for being with
thanks.
us. Thank you for watching. Thank you, Dr. Italy, for this amazing interview. And I hope that you guys enjoyed. I hope you go try to watch the movie wherever it is, if it's in theaters near you. And for some reason, YouTube thinks you're going to like this video next. So go check it out.
And so, where are you guys? I don't know where you're
We're
located.
in Buffalo, New York. Go
Buffalo.
Bills. Yep.
Yeah, that's awesome.